Discussion between people can be quite complex, especially when it's two people that disagree. As we have all likely experienced, discussions started with the intention to be open and engaging can dissolve easily to the point where they no longer serve a practical function. The use of ridicule is often a part of this disillusion. Hi, I'm R.
And I'm Jay.
And in this video, we're going to explore effective rational discourse and if ridicule has a place in it. Firstly, we think it's important to describe what discourse is. In short, it is a conversation, a sharing of concepts and ideas, and this can take many forms, especially now with the rise of the internet and thus social media. This doesn't even necessarily have to be two people directly talking or writing to one another. Putting ideas out into the public sphere and observing its reception within that public sphere is also a large-scale form of discourse. The key point being, though, is that discourse involves active discussion. I cannot engage in discussion with a brick wall as I can't share concepts and ideas with it. Considering this, it becomes apparent that engagement is an essential part of discourse, because if people aren't listening or can't understand the concepts being conveyed to them, they can't have ideas communicated to them, and thus can't engage in discourse. It all comes down to effective communication, and its efficacy is based on both how much people are motivated to listen to the ideas and how they can understand that communication.
So how is rational discourse different to standard discourse? In essence, they are very similar. However, there are a few important differences. In rational discourse, the goal is for all participants to commit to the rational testing of ideas without personal attachment. This in many ways is contrary to human nature, making maintaining rational discourse a difficult task. To achieve this, all participants are required to engage in open-minded inquiry with mutual respect of intellectual honesty. This means avoiding defense mechanisms such as ego, denial, personal attacks, and cynicism. So what happens if not everybody is able to follow these guidelines? Can we still achieve rational discourse? The primary goal of rational discourse is to maintain coherence in communication and consistent standards across all arguments. The term discourse stays the same. The objective is to share concepts and ideas, but the addition of rationality to the discourse introduces a requirement where these ideas and concepts must be shared in such a way that effective and consistent reasoning is maintained. So what would a discussion like this look like?
If you look at this flowchart here, you'll get an idea of what rational discourse looks like in theory. As much as it looks messy, much of this comes naturally. Present an argument, evaluate the argument, present a counter-argument, and assess the counter-arguments. Now, you may notice in the public sphere, things may not necessarily follow this perfectly. For example, if someone ridicules another person or idea, they aren't following the model of rational discourse perfectly. Does this now remove their contribution from being a part of rational discourse? The answer is maybe, as it depends on whether the ridicule prevents the progression of an idea or discussion. For example, if someone provides a large and in-depth counter-argument and has a few insulting jokes inside this explanation, it does not invalidate the counter-argument as a whole. As much as the joking insults may not contribute to the argument, they also cannot be used to invalidate the entire argument, as the argument can still be understood and makes coherent points that are separate from the insults. And in some cases, ridicule can be the entire argument. In the case of satire, an idea is presented in such a way that outlines the incoherence of the idea. It being presented in a sarcastic manner actually enhances the argument rather than detracting from it, by prompting the proponents of the idea to engage in self-analysis of the applications of their idea.
As previously stated, an essential part of discourse is engaging the participants, which often requires the content to have some degree of entertainment value, or else participants aren't going to engage into the discussion, and it then fails to meet the requirements of being discourse. Whilst there are other motivations outside of enjoyment for people to invest their time into things, enjoyment is a significant factor for retaining interest in something. Many of us likely have memories of good teachers and bad teachers in our lives, and one of the traits that set aside good teachers from the bad was the way they were able to make learning fun for students and engage them in a way that a teacher who just boringly recites information from a textbook or doesn't engage the students' interests will not. Now, does this mean any ridicule, sarcasm, or uncouth language is a welcome part of rational discourse? Of course not. If someone does not present an argument that contains substantive ideas that can be addressed, or diverts discussion from the topic argument to non-related personal points, it does not and cannot work to progress a discussion, and hence is not part of rational discourse. This can take many forms. For example, If a personal attack is used in place of a structured counter-argument, this is clearly a deviation from rational discourse. However, the reverse situation may also occur where a person picks on the statement made by the other party and uses that statement to direct attention away from the argument. An example of this may be when an individual makes a coherent argument in relation to the topic, but does so including vulgar or offensive language. While this aggressive language and ridicule may not add to the argument, even if it may add to the overall engagement, it doesn't necessarily take away from the argument. If a person draws attention to the use of language and the use of ridicule while ignoring the coherent argument contained within, they are in fact disrupting the rational discourse. Of course, use of sarcasm and ridicule can also have the opposite effect on engagement. If someone feels the need to address these factors rather than the argument, they obviously have reduced their engagement in the discussion. As much as this topic isn't clearly black and white, it is fairly easy once you understand the concepts. What someone contributes to a discussion has to have the potential to contribute substantially to the discussion of ideas. Indeed, the core of the contribution must be based on ideas and can be evaluated rationally, and also should be engaging to the participants of the discussion in order to promote this rational evaluation.
As we mentioned before, communication can take many forms, as communication can be a very dynamic concept, but its success is determined by how well ideas are conveyed from one party to another. In the sense of rational discourse, the only other criteria is that the discussion remains productive and adheres to a coherent structure which can produce a clear outcome. This means that rational discourse can also occur inside many other forms of discourse. Whether it is discourse between a scientifically literate person and a layman, the only important determining criteria should be effective communication of ideas and focused discussion on argument content and its structure. It's important to remember that we are describing the best case scenario in terms of what constitutes rational discourse, much of which goes against natural human instincts and emotion. If someone deviates from this strict model of discussion, it should not end the discourse, but rather prompt one or more of the parties involved to bring the discussion back within the parameters of what can constitute rational discourse. Thanks for watching our video on rational discourse. We really appreciate you making it all the way through. Make sure to hit that like button and share this video around to help us raise the bar of public discourse.